Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
They called it Project Fear during that referendum. But there are signs now that some of the warnings of post-Brexit economic trouble may be crystallising into Project Fact. Credit Suisse published its annual Global Wealth Report today and estimated that Britain is $1.5 trillion poorer in dollar terms due to the fall in the pound since the vote to leave the European Union. But even if you're not one of those people who even if you are one of those people who don't trust experts, it's hard to see a number of that magnitude. My 10-year-old tells me there are 12 noughts in a trillion in the context of our day-to-day existence. Much closer to home, Newsnight has been told that because of the value of sterling, food prices are now likely to rise by more than 5% over the next 6 months. Adam Parsons has the story.
We may not be a nation of shopkeepers, but we are a nation of devoted shoppers, savouring the memories of products from the past, days when smash meant potato and instant coffee was pretty exotic. Grocery shopping is at the very heart of our life. We all need the basics of life, we have to eat, but the cost of those essentials is critical to the economy. The more we spend on the weekly shop, the less we've got left for everything else. Well, it's easy to be nostalgic about spangles and old brands, but the fact is that back then in the 70s and 80s, your supermarket shop would take up a much bigger chunk of your money than it does now. In fact, over the past few years, food prices have actually seen some deflation. But now, following Brexit, well, the pound has weakened, and that means that ingredients and packaging that come from abroad have become more expensive. So someone is going to have to soak up those increased costs. And that's either the supplier, the retailer, or us, the customers. This man knows the answers better than most. Justin King ran Sainsbury's for a decade, during which time sales grew but prices stayed flat. He thinks the fall of the pound now is bound to push prices up.
Something at around 40 to 50% of what we buy in the shops is sourced abroad in currency other than the pound, and with the current rates of exchange we could expect that to be about 10% more expensive in a year's time. And if that's about half of what we buy, that means something of the order of 5% inflation.
After years of little or no changes in price, that rise would be significant, but it's a prediction backed up by the group that oversees the whole British food and drink industry.
Some prices will have risen. I don't think all prices will rise, but I think some prices will have risen between 5 and 8%. I think that's about where the consensus lays.
We've heard about battles involving Marmite and Toblerone, but not all suppliers are multinational giants. Many are small companies having to deal with a trading environment that's been all mixed up.
Well, raw material costs have gone up considerably since the 23rd of June. And that's something we're having to manage. I mean, they haven't gone up a little bit, they've gone up massively. We buy all our raw materials in either dollars or euros. So we don't want to pass that cost on to the consumer, but we can't absorb everything either. So we're having to look at ways to manage that through cost efficiencies and other ways.
So the challenge is how to find creative ways to avoid passing on rising costs to price-conscious customers.
We could buy from the UK rather than buy abroad. So we're looking at producing a hedgerow smoothie at the minute, which is picked, all the fruit comes just from the UK.
How many presents in the song 12 Days of Christmas?
Christmas is the busiest time of year for retailers. Glossy adverts, well-stocked shelves.
Oh, heck, where'd you put the tree?
Justin King thinks many are simply holding off inevitable price rises.
Well, I think back to the financial crisis of 2007-8, and there was a lot of conversation at that time about why we weren't immediately seeing the effects on the consumer and consumer behaviour. It actually took the best part of 18 months, maybe closer to 2 years, to filter through. It was 2010 before we saw consumers start to change the way that they shopped, batten down the hatches a little bit. And I think that's the kind of timelines that we're talking about.
Big famous shops don't have a divine right to exist. Woolworths and BHS, both testament to that. So if there's a grocery battle brewing, what determines the winners and losers?
The challenge is that the best run businesses will be able to hold back that inflation. They won't pass it all on to their customers. They'll look for competitive advantage. That's the nature of competition. So businesses that are already stretched, already perhaps with lower margins and with less strong relationships with their customers, they're the ones that are going to suffer in that environment, because they will get squeezed in the jaws of not being able to put prices up and costs continuing to increase.
Can you see a familiar high street name disappearing in this time because they just can't keep up with this battle?
Well, for sure it will happen. I just can't tell you which one it will be. That's the nature of competition. It will become clear over time who the winners and losers are.
We've become very used to very low food prices, but if these warnings are right, they may soon become a thing of the past.